YouTube, Dave here again. Welcome back to another viewer question. This week's question that I'm going to be going over deals all with regrets, buyer's remorse, and the regret of being inactive. So the questions that I've had asked in the past are, what are the books, are there any books in your collection that you regret buying, and are there books that you regret missing out on? So I kind of like this question. It's an interesting one, and I mean I do have quite a few D&D books, over I think well over 200 books, adventure supplements, and things like that. So that's what I consider to be a pretty decent collection for collecting over the past 18 years. That said, there are some things that I do regret not buying when I had the opportunity. I'm going to start with that one first because I can't show them because I don't have them. So the first one I want to talk about is the Monster Manual 5 for D&D 3.5. And most of these, if not all of these, are going to be 3.5 just because, I pretty much have everything that I want. For 4th edition, I have everything for 5th edition. And I wasn't really able to actively purchase a lot of stuff for 2nd edition, so I didn't really miss out. I just didn't have the ability to buy stuff really back then. So, Monster Manual 5. It's a book that came out near the end of 3.5's lifespan. It was at a point in time in which I was actually really burnt out from buying and adding books to my collection. I really felt like at that point in time I was done collecting Dungeons and Dragons. I think it also coincided with the fact that I was, at this point in time, working about a 6 to 8 month stint where I was doing 10-hour days from 6 a.m. until 4 p.m. At a location where I had to wait about an extra 45 minutes after I got off work to catch a bus home. And it was when the person I was working for owned 2 different locations. This is when I was working at Shell gas stations. So I was doing the paperwork at both sites, meaning I was getting up at like 3 a.m. To get ready, walk down to the nearest location, which was within walking distance, even though it was about a 40-minute walk, and do the paperwork there, which was about half an hour to 40 minutes, take a taxi to the place where I was going to put my shift in, and do all the paperwork there to be ready for a 6 a.m. opening. It was hectic, it was crazy, it really burnt me out. So I just was kind of done worrying about other stuff because I was just so tired and exhausted. Monster Manual 5 is a lot like the Monster Manual 4, which I showed off in my D&D 3.5 Buyer's Guide. The thing is, it had a lot of very new, updated versions of older monsters, fleshed them out, had maps. It was, from what I understand, a really great supplement. I just wasn't really into buying stuff at that point in time, so I passed on it. And then, my friend who owned his game store actually ended up having to close it due to financial issues. And it really sucked because I couldn't go back and buy it when I wanted to, which was the thing that I was basically looking to do, was, well, I'll get it later. And later never came. So it's one of the books I'm still looking out for today. Another book that I regret not getting for 3.5 is the Rules Compendium. And I have the Magic Item Compendium, I have the Spell Compendium, but I didn't get the Rules Compendium because, again, it was a later release. It was during a period of time in which I just, my collection, I considered it to be full as it was going to get, and I didn't think I was going to use it. The biggest reason was it was kind of collecting rules and information from a myriad of supplements, most of which I had, so it just felt like it was a bit redundant at that point, and I didn't really think I'd end up using it that much. So that's something that, again, I genuinely regret not getting. The other books that I regret not getting are the Expedition series. So I have Expedition to Castle Ravenloft, I have Expedition to the Demonweb Pits, but there were 2 other books released, and they were Expedition to the Ruins of Undermountain and Expedition to Castle Greyhawk. And I really, again, passed up on those because I was really not looking for more adventures. At this point in time, I had Dungeon magazines, which were still, I think, in print at the time that these were coming out. So I had 3 full-length campaigns just based on these magazines alone. I had Shackled City, Age of Worms, and Savage Tide, and my plans were to run those campaigns. So individual adventures just weren't really of interest to me at that point in time. I had, tons and tons of issues of Dungeon Magazine, so I had lots of adventures that I could just kind of plug into any particular campaign. So those 2 books are ones that I regret as well. The 5th book that I regret not getting is the book Complete Champion. So with Complete Champion, it was the last of the Complete series. I had all of them up until that point. But the last couple of books were really sort of disappointing, and I'll get to one of those in particular in the next section of this video. But because of those last two being, in my opinion, really lackluster and not containing anything that I would end up actually using, I decided to basically skip over it. And the idea was, again, if I felt like getting it, I would just get it from, my friend's store when the opportunity presented itself. But again, he ended up closing and going out of business. So those are the books that I regret getting. There's probably a few others, but none of them come to mind at this point in time. So I'm always looking to see if I can find those particular books at a decent price to help fill out my collection. So that was the first part of the video, dealing all with regrets, but we also have buyer's remorse. So there are certain times where you pick up a book thinking it's going to be great, thinking you're going to enjoy it, and it just is lackluster or even kind of bad or useless to you. So I've got 5 of them. I had 5 books that I regretted not getting, so let's go with 5 books that I do regret actually purchasing. So the first one is the book that caused me not to get Complete Champion. We're going to go with Complete Mage. So it's not necessarily that this book is terrible, but it just didn't live up to the high standards that the other complete books really set for themselves. I just found that it wasn't that interesting to go through. I didn't enjoy it. This almost feels more like a beginner's book if you want to play arcane characters, but if you're a veteran player and you own all the other complete stuff, especially Complete Arcane, which was an amazing book, this one just really felt short. It didn't feel like it was that great, and I've never used anything out of it. Even back when I was trying to make a point of using at least something out of all of my books, this one never ended up getting used for anything. So this is one that I could honestly say, looking back, I kind of regret picking up. Alright, the next one that I regret picking up is the Epic Level Handbook for 3.5. I was hoping that this would be a better book than it ended up being. I actually bought this after 3.5 had already come out, but I was looking to run a campaign that was going to go into the epic levels, at least up to I think level 25 or 26. So I bought this hoping that there would be some great stuff in here, things that I'd really enjoy, but I just found it to be sort of a game balancing nightmare. The epic level monsters are so ridiculously out of hand that honestly there's no reason for any of the campaign worlds to ever really exist. I mean, when you get a creature that can deal 100 melee attacks, you know you're pretty well screwed. I mean, that can kill any player characters at any time. It was challenging enough to basically go up to and defeat gods. And just trying to find things like epic level spells was kind of a nightmare. It was like formulaic, and you had to combine seeds of things, and it was just not great. So this is a book that cost me $65, and I literally got next to no use out of it. So again, this is a book that I definitely consider to be a regret picking up. Alright, the next book that I regret picking up is Deities and Demigods for 3rd edition. This is 3.0. But the biggest reason that I regret this is because I picked up, I've got it right here behind me, I think, see if I can get to it easily enough. Here we go. So before I picked up Deities and Demigods, I had picked up the Forgotten Realms, Faiths and Pantheons, and this book was awesome. It goes into some of like the background information and the history of some of the more major deities in the Forgotten Realms setting, and I loved this book. Reading like the history of Bane, Mystra, it was just such a great book. I really enjoyed it, and I was hoping to have that same level of quality in Deities and Demigods, because there were gods in here that I was really genuinely interested in. Gods like Vecna, Hextor, Erroneous, Palor. So I thought this was going to be an awesome book and an awesome read, and what it is it's just their stats. It's their stats and their tactics and stuff like that. Now it does have other pantheons, including historical ones like the Greek, Norse, Egyptian, and they even have something to create like a monotheistic setting, which is kind of interesting, but it wasn't something that I really ever wanted to do, and I wasn't looking to incorporate those other gods. So, and again, I didn't want their stats because I'm not going to have the player characters fight them. So this, again, just felt like an absolute waste of money. Alright, this next one wasn't technically a Wizards of the Coast release, but it was a book that I was really genuinely looking forward to. I thought it was going to be one of the coolest things I was going to be able to add to my collection, and it just ended up being kind of meh. And that is the Dragon Compendium. It says Volume 1, but I don't think they ever released another one. So this is put out by Paizo Publishing, because they were handling Dragon Magazine at the time. And what this was is it was labeled as taking some of the greatest articles from the 30-year history of Dungeons & Dragons and updating any of the rules sections contained within for 3.5. It sounded great. I was really looking forward to that. They ended up making this more like a player's handbook. It has races and classes that I don't care about. Like, I don't want to play. See if I can find it right quick. The thing that I think was one of the first things that I saw when I actually cracked this book open too, which was really disappointing. Here we go. So this was when I first flipped open the book. This was one of the first pages that I got to, and it has a jester. And to me, that was just dumb. I really didn't want, a core 20 level jester class. I wanted to read the old articles. I wanted to read some of the more historical stuff from its earliest days. I don't want another type of player's handbook with races, classes, feats, spells. I didn't want that. I wanted to see some of the cooler articles, and they really didn't focus much on any of them at all. It really felt like a letdown when I ended up getting them. The only thing that's kind of cool about it is it does have a section in the back that kind of lets you sound out some of the more confusing to say names in Dungeons & Dragons. But this book was a huge disappointment, and what was even worse is that this cost, I think, $70 when it first came out. Oh, nope, sorry, hold on. It was $60 after tax. It was $54.95. And it was just such a huge price because everything else was around $49, or $45, or even $39.99. So this was a really expensive book, and it just kind of sucked. However, it's not the worst book in my collection. It's not the one that I regret the most. The one that I end up regretting the most, and for a lot of similar reasons as to the last book, is the Miniatures Handbook. So when this came out, I was looking forward to it because my friends and I at the store, we were all into the plastic D&D minis. With the first set that came out, which is Harbinger, which came out shortly before this was released, there was so much, it was so difficult for the store owner to keep booster packs in stock. In fact, we would actually be limited to the number that we could pre-order or reserve to ensure that the maximum number of people were able to get stuff. So you get a whole case in, and it's like, well, you can only really reserve 3 of them. And if there's any left at the end of the day, then, you can help yourself. So this was something that I was really looking forward to because this was going to be like the comprehensive rule system for D&D minis, and that's why I bought this book. There's over 70 pages of this book dedicated to the role-playing game, which to me is just kind of crazy. I don't want new races or classes. I don't think there's so many races in here, but there's classes, feats, spells, and it's like you don't need that in a book that's supposed to be for the miniatures game. At the very least, if you're going to include this sort of stuff, put it at the back of the book. Make the front half of the book, or the stuff that you open up first, actually be about the miniatures game that you're supposed to be cross-marketing this with. If you want to have some role-playing stuff, tuck it in the back, label as an appendix, that's fine. But this was the first 70 some odd pages of the book were dedicated to the role-playing game, and I wasn't interested. And some of these things were reprinted also in later books, like the War Mage, which was in here. I think the Marshal was also reprinted in the later book. So this was just, again, a huge waste of money, and this only covered the first 2 sets of the game, which were Harbinger and Dragon's Eye, and I think it had a few things for Archfiends, which was the next set to come out. But after that, they introduced so many different things and mechanics and new abilities in future sets that this book was basically rendered obsolete. So a friend and I think we both ended up buying this, and I think we were both equally disappointed because we never brought this to the table when we were playing D&D minis. So, it's kind of a negative topic. I don't really like talking about negative stuff too much, but those are my D&D collecting regrets. So there are books that I regret not missing the opportunity to pick up, and there are books that I kind of wish I would have passed up in exchange for the ones that I ended up missing. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, if you have any other topics that you want me to cover as question and answer type of things, please comment below. I've got a great list of things to go through, but the more stuff you guys can add, the better. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.